Well, good evening to all of you, and a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for attending. And I know that as we commence, there's always a rush for people to uh, sign on, but nevertheless, we have to continue. It is a great pleasure for me tonight to welcome you all to this webinar. And furthermore, it's a great pleasure to thank our partner, uh, the Virtual Lighting Design Community, VLDC. We encourage all of you in the lighting field to become inspired and join this group of inspired people, lighting professionals from all over the world. It's a fantastic organization, and I encourage you to join them. Right, and once again, Dr. Amardeep Dugar, a very great welcome to you as our guest presenter this evening. It's an
Thank
honor to
you.
have you with us, and we thank you for your time, the time you've taken to prepare, and so on. Dr. Amardeep has been engaged in architectural lighting design since 2002. That's a considerable amount of time. He's a qualified architect and he champions the comprehensive aspects of lighting, lighting that encompasses design, education, and research. And you may be interested to know that in 2010, he established Lighting Research and Design, a firm that embodies the principles that he holds so dear. He's a Master of Arts in Architectural Lighting from the University of Wismar in Germany, followed by a PhD in the same field from the Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. So his stature in the academic and professional realms is quite profound. He's made distinguished contributions to the lighting design, including significant projects in commercial, healthcare, and hospitality sectors. And he's received numerous prestigious accolades, international accolades. So, without further ado, we can look forward to his topic this evening, a topic which has got a great big word to start with: salutogenesis. And many of you perhaps either looked it up, uh, used AI or Google or whatever means, and you would have found that it's a term applied in health sciences referring to an approach towards wellness, focusing on health, and it is different from pathogenesis that focuses on disease and illness. So, Dr. Amardeep, we look forward to your presentation. And I would like to also point out shortly uh, that we are in the month of November, and as part of our celebration for our recent accreditation by the HEA, we are also having a Black November where we discount our enrollment fees for the different courses. So without further ado, it will be over to Dr. Amardeep.
Thank you, Philip. And thank you, Daniel, who's not here. He's probably in the audience, probably. And thank you, BHA, for conducting these wonderful set of webinars, connecting people all over the world. It's a privilege to be a part of this and sharing some of my knowledge that I've gained over the years in this presentation. So this presentation is part of one of an ongoing research project that I'm currently working on. I have to admit I don't have finalized answers to this. What I'm going to be presenting is just a journey that I've had over the years and what it all means. And as Philip has very beautifully explained the whole concept of salutogenesis and how it's different from pathogenesis. This whole uh, idea, thought started with this concept of wellness. So I would like to say a few things as part of the procedural. What are the objectives of this presentation? Is to map out the steps that are necessary to create salutogenic lighting environments. I'm sure a lot of you must be thinking, what does salutogenesis have to do with lighting? I'll try to bring about the relationship during the course of the presentation as in how did I come up with this topic. So let's just understand the objectives first. The second objectives is identify the elements of lighting that could probably contribute towards the development of a strong sense of coherence. You'll also understand why salutogenesis and coherence, the sense of coherence, are interrelated. And then we'll discuss what are the causes of stress, and we'll introduce some wellness factors that could strengthen uh, the concept of health in lighted environments. And finally, the fourth objective is demonstrate how anxiety, stress can be lowered, and this whole sense of self-worth, self-actualization can be reinforced and promoted through lighting environments. Because when we talk about wellness, a lot of times only think about health, but health has encompasses so many different aspects of our daily lifestyle, and we'll understand this in this whole presentation that I'm going to be putting forward here. So, in the lighting industry's hyperbole, now when we talk about wellness, what I have observed over the years is that many people have a very cliched view of wellness and nature, and a, it's a little bit of a fuzzy intention. The idea is to replicate nature. And one thing I've observed with a lot of times when you talk about health and wellness is, don't we come across this image so many times? Color tunable light. The moment you talk about color tunable light, you say, yes, it's about light and health, human centricity, and that's where all things is about. So when you talk about human centric lighting, and this is one phrase that I really begin to kind of detest because it's used like such a marketing gimmick, human centric lighting. So the moment you bring in color tunable light, it's called human centric lighting and it's all about health. Now, there are a few more who have evolved, gone beyond this, and they say that if there's some kind of a view of an artificial sky, it's something to do with wellness. They're not wrong. I'm not saying it's nothing wrong in putting an artificial sky, but my thought process started is, can there be something more beyond it? And those who have gone one step further, they say, why not put some more photographic representations of nature? Honestly, this image is not bad. It looks really nice. It's good to have a view of nature. But again, I'm really beginning to think, is this what wellness is all about? So, when we talk about this big concept of human centric lighting and wellness and health, the way I see the lighting industry is it seems like a high profile apothecary that sells apothecary, we all know it's a pharmacy. And then moment you go to the pharmacy and you say, I've got a headache, and the pharmacy only sells aspirin. So you've got a headache, it says aspirin. I've got a fever, it says aspirin. I've got COVID, aspirin. It's pretty much what the lighting industry does. So every time you talk about health, color tunable light. I want something which is for human emotional health, color tunable light. So it's a great idea, but sometimes I feel it's probably bleached of its full potential. So this is where my opinion is about a whole concept. And this is where this whole journey began in terms of light and health and wellness. And where does it start? And I have to admit, my own personal journey about health and wellness was pretty much like a very famous and old grandma's tale of the blind man and the elephant. So there were a few blind men, and they all brought close to an elephant. One of these blind men approached the elephant from the front, caught hold of the trunk, and he says, "Ah, this is a snake." Another blind man took a ladder, climbed up, caught hold of the ear of the elephant. "Oh, yeah, that's a fan." Another blind man went from behind, caught hold of the tail of the elephant, and said, "Oh, that's a rope." Each of them have their own interpretations, and I have to say that my journey over this last from 2002 to here is about 22 years of my life has been explorations of wellness, and this is what I've been doing. I kept approaching it like a blind man from different directions. I wasn't wrong, but I wasn't right either. So how did I start? I started out as an architect, and this is probably the only project that I worked on as an architect, as a qualified architect. This was um, a hostel building for a school up in the Himalayas in Missouri. And my whole idea of wellness at that time in 2002, I'm one and two, that I'm saying, was about daylight design, where I designed this whole school with passive solar heating. And I thought, yes, I'm doing something great for this school building by bringing in natural light into the area, and thought this was about something doing for the well-being of these students of this hostel. And then I became a lighting designer, and in those times tunable light had just entered the market, and this is pre-LED times. So this was the Berlin Medical Society building that I got to work on. It also won an ILD Award of Excellence, and it had these tunable R, G, and B fluorescent T5 tube lights in that indirect light. Or do you see that pendant over here? There's an indirect light pendant, and that's what it was used for. And I thought this is going to be something about light and health and tunable lighting. And then came the LED revolution, and still tunable lighting became a little bit more high tech, where I worked on this call center, and this was in Bangalore, and it did not have any access to daylight. So the idea was to start mimicking daylight with these tunable lighting. And I thought this is about giving them a healthy environment. Staying as a tunable in as a lighting designer, then it went on to circadian effective lighting. So tunable lighting got a much more catchphrase called the circadian effective light. The intention was here to provide blue enriched lighting in work areas and warmer light in relaxation areas. So the idea was to improve visual acuity, and the idea is also to improve suppress melatonin levels, improve concentration during work areas. And if you notice, the blue is only being used in indirect components, so there's no direct blue that is being used, so it doesn't affect the eye. It's just enough blue to suppress your melatonin levels and improve your concentration and work atmospheres. And then biophilia. It's something which is the most recent catchphrase, biophilic design. And this was in a hospital building that I got to work on, where it was designed at the tallest green wall in Asia, as may call it. This project also won a LIT award. And the idea was to bring in green elements into design areas and to how to light them up. Parallelly to a lighting designer, I'm also a lighting researcher. I've done a PhD in lighting. And as a research scientist, my explorations was further into biophilic lighting design, where I was looking at what is the optimum way of lighting plants, green walls in interior spaces. Optimum by meaning you need to keep the plants healthy, and optimum by saying that if there are humans interacting with these plants, they're looking at them every day. So how do you make them look good, feel good? And this was a very interesting research project that I got to do with the University College London in trying to identify what is the optimum LED lighting in terms of spectral power density, intensity, and for lighting up green walls. As a research scientist, I also dabbled around a little bit with user experience design, and this was my PhD project. Now, user experience becomes also a part of wellness because in the end, what you're designing for is how users feel good in a space. And that's where I went about designing this interface. And idea was to make an intuitive interface because a lot of times remote controls with buttons are not a very a good way of interacting with lighting. So I went into a little bit more further and trying to design a more interactive way of looking at lighting controls because the only way of bringing tangibility to light is an intangible medium. How do you bring tangibility to this intangible medium is by controlling light. And the intention was to make lighting controls more intuitive so that people can actually be starting using them in a very interesting manner. I also dabbled around a little bit with product design, where I was working with this company called Sunroof, and the intention was to bring in these artificial windows and artificial skylights within interior spaces where there is no possibility of bringing daylight. And one of the concepts that was introduced was how do you bring in vitamin D inside interior spaces? Now, we all know that UV light, specifically UVB, which has a very specific frequency bandwidth, if that interacts with your skin, it produces vitamin D. And the intention was of designing these skylights and windows with these small base components of UV light, which will improve vitamin D components within the body in interior spaces, in spaces where they cannot be bringing in any daylight. And one of my most life-changing experience came during the pandemic when I became a yoga instructor. And here, wellness is all about dynamic expression of life. And what I did understand going back to the ancient roots from yogic sciences and Vedic sciences was being stable and established in the self. And believe me, this is probably the best thing that I like doing is keep doing yoga. And lighting design is now is just a side job for me. I enjoy more doing yoga than lighting design. So coming back to wellness, I went back to the ancient definitions of wellness. What is wellness? What does it encompass? So, the ancient definition of wellness says that it's a holistic system that is tailored to an individual's unique constitution. So, when we talk about every individual, we all are uh, unique people. We have a set of hygiene, we have a set of nutrition, we have a set of social interaction, we also have a set of exercise routines. So, it's a holistic system. Wellness is all about your own personal system, and the intention is to maintain balance that prevents illness. So that's what the ancient definition of uh, wellness as defined in our ancient texts. Now, the modern definition of wellness, as provided by the Global Wellness Institute, is an active pursuit of activities, choices, and lifestyles that lead to a state of holistic health. Now, if you look back, the ancient and the modern definition are not too different. It's just that this is a little bit more concise way of explaining the whole process here. Now, holistic health can be so many different things, and it cuts across so many cultural, geographical boundaries. Now, going back to the ancient science of Ayurveda, holistic health is talked about as swasthya. Swasthya, the definition of the meaning of swasthya is stability in the true self. It's the state of complete balance, physical, mental, and spiritual well being. And the WHO defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well being. And it's not just about an absence of diseases. And that's where I came across this term called salutogenesis, which in very concise term means prevention of diseases and promotion of health. This word really hit me. I mean, this is something very interesting. So I dig a little bit deeper to find out that this phrase salutogenesis was coined by a professor of medical sociology by the name Aaron Antonovsky. What Antonovsky theorizes is that it's about how people manage stress and stay well. And according to Antonovsky, he says that stress is ubiquitous in the sense that all of us experience stress. It could be positive stress, it could be negative stress, but there are certain individuals who achieve good health despite their exposure to potentially destabilizing stress factors. So, how is it that these few individuals are able to cope with all these stress mechanisms? What is it that they have? What's so special about them? And what he goes ahead and says is that these individuals have something called a sense of coherence. So, sense of coherence, the definition is in the course of life, we face a lot of stimuli. It could be an internal stimuli which could be happening within. You might not be feeling good from inside emotionally, or there could be something externally that could happen. I mean, your car broke down, or your business went into a loss. But in order to meet all these demands that are posed by these stimuli, these individuals have this sense of coherence because they have a set of resources. And these resources could be financial resources in terms of a great bank balance. It could be emotional resources in terms of family, friends, a great partner. It could be intellectual resources. And the fact that they have all these resources, these individuals have this confidence, and what they're able to do is that they're able to treat these stimuli as challenges, and they think it's a worthy investment or engagement, and they deal with these challenges head on. So that's what sense of coherence is all about. And this made me think, where does lighting come into the picture here? Can lighting really bring about this sense of coherence into this whole practice? Because if you're looking at designing for health and wellness, then I mean, looking at it from a very logical point of view, lighting should bring in this sense of coherence. And that's when I saw this nice graphic provided by a physician by the name John Travis. John Travis says that illness and wellness are not two different things. They are the same thing. They're one and the same thing, but it's just one single continuum. So when you go, there's each of us, more often than not, are into one neutral point. And when we go towards the illness continuum, there are signs, there are symptoms, there are disabilities, and eventual death. And that's your premature death that happens. However, when we look at the positive side, towards the wellness, it is by awareness, education, and growth we can reach a higher level of wellness. And a lot of times we notice that, be it healthcare design, hospital design, it only works on a treatment paradigm wherein it looks at treating the diseases and brings everyone point to a neutral point. But beyond that, it doesn't explore to the wellness. So the wellness paradigm talks about creating awareness, creating education, creating growth, and moving people from a neutral point to a higher level of wellness. Now, this got me really intriguing. Can lighting actually do that? Can lighting educate people, create awareness, create this growth to move people from this neutral point towards a higher level of wellness? So let's look at lighting. What does lighting encompass? Now, light has got different variables. What are those variables? The first variable is the intensity. It's the quantity of light which is measured in photometric units or radiometric units. The second is the spectral power distribution, which is the power as a function primarily of the wavelength, but also you can state it as frequency, it's just spectrum. And from a very architectural perspective, light happens in patterns. The first pattern is spatial patterns in the sense that how light is spatially distributed inside the three-dimensional field, whether it's light shadow patterns. And the second pattern is the temporal pattern. And temporal means in terms of time, which can be subdivided into two parts, which is timing and duration. So timing is at what time you're exposed to a specific intensity or a specific spectrum of light, and duration is how long you're being exposed to that specific intensity or duration of light. So it's about, and it also talks about history. So how long you have been exposed for the history. So all these five parameters, five variables work like a well-oiled mechanism. And that's when you look at it from a lighting design perspective. So this is light. So if I'm to going back to what this presentation is trying to, looking at the issues and aims which this presentation aims to, or this whole research project aims to answer or solve, is this whole craving for nature is recognized in built environments. We all want nature. And what we need is essential frameworks to understand how nature can be brought about using lighting design. However, what we've seen in some of the early examples is that a lot of these design concepts that are related to nature are criticized, and they're called as greenwashing or placebo strategies. Placebo strategies means it's just, it doesn't have any scientific bearing. It's just there, and just because it's there, you feel good about it. So a lot of further investigations need to be conducted to actually examine the impacts and effects on wellness. So the aim of this presentation is to overcome this whole fuzzy nature for wellness. And as a researcher, I'm looking at the whole thing from a very analytical point of view. Now, I have to say that it's really difficult being a researcher and a designer at the same time, because design talks about a lot of these arbitrary concepts. It can be, I mean, as designers, we are very bohemian in our approach. But as a researcher, you need to be very logical. So the idea is to develop this analytical approach that understand how salutogenic design can contribute to this whole goal of wellness, and to investigate what could be the benefits of addressing these specific challenges. So that's where my journey began into salutogenic lighting design. So looking at wellness, what I did find is that the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is based in the US, it provides 8 dimensions of wellness: physical, spiritual, emotional, occupational, intellectual, environmental, financial, and social wellness. Now, 8 dimensions of wellness. What I did was put them into a list here. And if you look at it closely, the first 4 dimensions, which is intellectual, physical, emotional, and spiritual wellness, they're all got to do with something which is internally. That's something which happens within you. And financial, environmental, social, and occupational wellness are wellness that are determined by a lot of the external factors. So I've just, I mean, this is just from a very prima facie point of view in order to take the discussion forward. So what I'm trying to do is trying to pair these dimensions, where I'm saying that intellectual and financial wellness can be clubbed together, physical and environmental wellness could be clubbed together, and emotional and social wellness could be clubbed together, and spiritual and occupational wellness could be clubbed together. Now, you could always argue that occupational could go with emotional too, environmental could go with intellectual. Now, this is just to take this discussion forward from the most obvious aspect of it, and trying to see if I could really come up with some kind of a discussion taking forward. No, because otherwise we'll only be going around and around in circles. And biophilic design is something which really talks about nature. And having looked at a lot of papers on biophilic design, I found this one paper by Zhang and rest of other authors, which talks about biophilic design in architecture. And these authors talk about three primary aspects of how to bring nature into architectural and built environments. First is nature incorporation, where you create these natural elements or you artificially create these natural elements, you bring in these phenomena or processes to create these multisensory experiences within a built environment. Then they talk about nature inspiration, where you imitate nature, and then by this imitation, you evoke the sense of nature. It could be forms, it could be patterns, it could be imagery. And third is nature interaction, where you arrange spaces based on how humans and nature interact and create these relationship. So you the connections, how people move across. So that's the neat nature interaction. So this was something which was more related to how I wanted to approach this research. So that's something which I'm using. And Antonovsky and a couple of other researchers, particularly Delany, they talk about something called salutogenic design, which is a combination or a intersection of neuroscience, psychology, and architecture. And what they talk about in their design is that a sense of coherence can be brought about in a built environment or a design space by making the space comprehensible, by making the space manageable, and by making the space meaningful. So, comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness in design spaces is what brings about sense of coherence. So, a lot of this information. Now, I was just trying to play around with these graphics. So, my first graphic was salutogenic design, where I talk about comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. All of this bring about a sense of coherence. Interestingly, the same graphic could be used for biophilic design, where you have nature incorporation, nature interaction, and nature inspiration to bring in this whole holistic sense of nature within space. And I ended up being a lot more confused. Sense of coherence, nature, all these internal, external dimensions of wellness. On the one hand, you have comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. And then on the other hand, you have nature interaction, nature inspiration, and nature incorporation. As a researcher, the idea is to bring in order to some chaos. So I went back. Let's, and this is again something which I'm playing around with graphics, with phrases and words, trying to bring some logic, trying to bring some meaning to this whole discussion. So what I've done is on one side, I positioned the three aspects of the sense of coherence, but it is comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. And just from word, getting the meanings of this using Google, trying to get which phrase matches best with which one. Nature incorporation matches well with comprehensibility, nature interaction with manageability, because again, you're managing something, and nature inspiration is about meaningfulness because both seem to have very close meaning to in terms of English or just from a syntactic meaning of the word. And then trying to bring these dimensions of wellness into this whole conversation, where I'm trying to say that this whole pairing of comprehensibility and nature incorporation suits well with intellectual and financial wellness. Manageability and interaction suits well both with physical, environmental, and emotional and social wellness. And this whole uh, combination of meaningfulness and inspiration fits well with spiritual and occupational wellness. Now, again, I tried playing around where does intellectual fit well with that, and round in circles. And you know what I came up with? This movie. Have you seen this movie? It's called Live, Die, Repeat, where it's called The Edge of Tomorrow, where Tom Cruise is trying to solve this and goes back in time, dies, come back, goes back in time, guys, come back, and that's exactly was my problem was. So no point going back. So I just went back to this earlier discussion. And just to take this discussion forward, let's look at the first set of pairing of manageability, nature interaction, and let's look at how physical, environmental, and emotional and social wellness work with each other. So my first hypothesis here is that lighting design that naturally interacts with our body's cardiovascular, cognitive, and metabolic functions can enable us to maintain optimal health. So first, let's look at physical wellness. So physical wellness is all about getting the most of our daily activities without undue fatigue, without physical stress. And it's important that we start recognizing our daily habits, behaviors, because all of that impacts our overall health, well-being, and our quality of life. What it means is that there is an internal manifestation because there are so many systems within our body. You've got your cardiovascular system, you have your mucoskeletal system, you have your coagulation system, you have a central nervous system, and all of these need to elicit the correct responses for our body to function properly. And light plays a major role here because what we know is that the circadian system controls our hormones, and all these temporal patterns created using the different intensities, different spectrums of light elicit these responses. So our body functions at different parts. Each body part functions differently at different times of the day, depending upon and light, the intensity of light, the spectrum of light affects how each of these works. I'm sure you must have read about this. I'm not going to be going too much into the detail. The idea is we want to maintain the appropriate melatonin and serotonin levels because these regulate rest of all the other body parts, rest of all the hormones within the body and the rest of all the systems. So what we're trying to do and summarize here is that the right intensity, the right spectrum of light at the right time that can enable us to make us aware of our bodily functions. So if you're doing something, we need the lighting to actually make us aware that, yes, this is the time to sleep. This is the time to wake up. This is probably the time to go have lunch. This is probably the time to go have a cup of coffee. So if lighting can start providing these little cues, then it's your physical wellness that comes into play and you're aware of your bodily functions through lighting. And you're pairing this with environmental wellness because your lifestyle depends upon our relationship with our community, with our external environment. So we need to respect nature and all the species living within it. And this external manifestation also is about the temporal patterns within built spaces because what it does is that the right timing, the right duration of light will make you aware. This create this awareness about your bodily functions. So if I'm to put forward in a very simplistic manner, it's the right intensity spectrum of light that create the right temporal patterns for our bodily functions in built environments. So there are certain times in a space you might need warm light. There are certain times you'll need cool light, just like how you have daylight coming into spaces. And that's what helps you make you aware of your environmental and your physical wellness. Now, the second hypothesis is about emotional and social wellness. Now, lighting design that naturally interacts with our feelings and moods can enable us to maintain a sense of belonging and connection to the world. So that's what I am hypothesizing here. Now, let's look at emotional wellness. Now, emotional wellness is all about being aware of our own feelings and our own responses to everyday interaction. If somebody gets angry too fast or somebody gets depressed, a lot of times, more often than not, they themselves don't know why they're getting angry, why are they getting so sad. So, the idea is to understand why we are feeling the way we are feeling and then actively taking these necessary steps to control your or subjugate. Control is a wrong word. I would say subjugate is a better word here. To actively respond, subjugate your feelings. I mean, live with it. You can't, suppressing feelings is also not considered very good. So you subjugate it, you work around it, and you take this. And what does all this have got to do with is the internal manifestation is about your nervous system. So our body consists of two parts within the nervous system, which is the parasympathetic system and the sympathetic system. And within the parasympathetic system, there's a bigger subdivision called the dorsal and the ventral system. What do they do? So firstly, the parasympathetic dorsal system, what it does is that it immobilizes. So a speeding truck is approaching you, you freak out and you stand there. That's immobilization. So you might be wondering if the parasympathetic system is about immobilization. Do we really need that? We actually need it because there's this ventral aspect of the parasympathetic system which deals a lot with your social engagement. So you actually need the parasympathetic sympathetic system because apart from doing a very stupid thing of immobilization, it also does something very important, which is your social engagement. And then you have the sympathetic nervous system, which is about mobilization. What I mean by mobilization is your flight and fright uh, syndrome, the way that you react, you run, or you want to fight. It's all done by the sympathetic nervous system. You might be asking, how does all this relate to light? Now, if you look at the makeup of your eye, your visual system, whenever there's bright light, your pupils contract, and whenever there's low light, your pupils dilate. And what it means from a nervous point of view is that when your pupils contract, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system. And when your pupils dilate, it activates your sympathetic nervous system. So, what it literally means is that bright light is for your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your immobilization or your social interaction, and dim light is for your sympathetic nervous system, which is more for your flight or fright, your mobilization. Now, from a design point of view, how all this uh, plays together. So, the right intensity of light makes us aware of our behavioral patterns. So, emotional wellness is directly linked to the intensity of light. So, bright light stimulates us to interact with our surroundings, and low light stimulates us to interact with each other. So, that's one of the reasons why, if you notice, why do five-star or hotels like they create these low light, or when they talk about an intimate dinner, they say a candlelit dinner. Why is it low light? Because it stimulates you to interact with each other. Bright light or a fast food is more about interacting with your surroundings. So that's a scientific, a health oriented explanation of why designers do what they design in their spaces. And the next part of this is social wellness. It's about building, nurturing meaningful relationships with individuals, groups, and communities. And what you're trying to encourage is communication, trust, conflict management, because you want to show respect to all cultures, you want to integrate. And that's what social wellness is all about. So it's an external manifestation, and how it relates to lighting is that the intensity of light in built spaces can create this awareness about our immediate surroundings. And if I'm to put these together in terms of social wellness, it's the right intensity again, which encourages the right behavior. So when you have bright light, you interact with the surroundings, and when you have dim light, you interact with one another. So here again, your social wellness and your emotional wellness are directly related to lighting. Now that's the first block. Let's look at the second block of meaningfulness and nature inspiration, where I'm putting these together in terms of spiritual and occupational wellness. Now, spiritual wellness has got nothing to do with religion. Now, keep religion aside. Spiritual wellness is all about being in tune with your inner self. You begin start finding meaning in life events. If something unfortunate happens, you try to reason out why this has happened, you remain resilient, and you're better prepared to face life's challenges. And that can also be for something good, because too much of happiness is also considered a stress. It could be a stressful atmosphere. So when you have too much of sadness, it's obviously not something good, but sometimes too much of happiness can also be something which you cannot cope with. People are not, and as I've seen, it's much more easier to deal with success, deal with failure than dealing with success, because people fail a lot when they succeed too much more. So that's something which is got to do with your spiritual wellness. And the internal manifestation of this is that we've talked about visual system, we've talked about circadian system, but a very often neglected aspect of the human vision and how we interact with space is the perceptual system. And perceptual system is often neglected because there are not too many scientific definitions for it. It's way too abstract. And the way we perceive space. So, and this has got to do with the spatial patterns. Again, using the right intensity and the spectrum of light, because this is what elicit responses from the perceptual system. And we've all heard of these phrases, and we're going to be going back to them. Color constancy. We've heard about color constancy, how we see a color and then we close our eyes and look at some other place. That same color repeats, although it's not the same color. That's your brain, your perceptual system playing games with you. We've talked about, have you heard about this phrase called lightness constancy? Again, there are bright spaces, there are dark spaces. When you're exposed too much to a bright space and then suddenly you come to a dark space, your perceptual system still tries to replicate that same thing of creating that same lightness constancy. Orientation constancy. We're all used to seeing straight skyscrapers, and suddenly you see a twisted skyscraper. You feel really claustrophobic. Is this even there? That's because, again, your brain tries to play these games with your mind and says this is what it is trying to create. Shape constancy. You see a half circle, your mind automatically tries to complete that circle. Size constancy. You see the football and you think the size of the gate is as small as the football. Or you can look at it the other way. It's a giant size football. So that's shape constant or size constancy. So all of this put together is all about your perceptual system. And here again, you need the right spatial patterns of light and shadows. And how does the brain find meaning and logic is that it anchors to examples found in nature. So that's where nature plays a major role, because our awareness, our deep thoughts are so rooted in nature that whenever we see something happening which is out of place, we think, oh, in nature it doesn't happen. Why is it happening like this here? So that's why nature gives this whole rootedness for, again, your spiritual wellness. And what I'm trying to do is putting together in terms of an occupational wellness and trying to relate this with occupational wellness. So, occupational wellness is the career options, the opportunities that you enjoy the most. So, what you want to do is recognize the importance of satisfaction, enrichment, and meaning through work. Yes, we need to work in order to be able to survive. But what is it that we are looking for beyond survival? Satisfaction, enrichment of us as individuals, and finding meaning through work. And this is again an external manifestation because something happening from the outside. Your work environments, every time you enter into a built space, your work environment, what you're looking for is perceptual depth. Because when you're going to be working in a space and you're going to be spending 1/3 of your life in a work environment, you need to have a sense of logic of space and time within a space, within your working environments. And that's where you want to bring in intensity, spectrum of light that create logical patterns of light and shadows, because that's what provides you with this deeper sense of orientation. A lot of you might have seen these examples of these artificial skylights that are put inside uh, spaces that don't have any daylight. And the intention why they look good in basement spaces, in this here, this is an elevator lobby which doesn't have any sense of windows or skylight. This artificial skylight is put in there because what it does is that firstly it gives you a logical pattern of light and shadow which happens in nature, and this in turn provides you with a deep sense of orientation. Let's look at another example. This is a cabin which doesn't have any windows. So a skylight has been provided that provides this sense of orientation. And now looking at the final block, which is about comprehensibility and nature incorporation. I'm trying to look at this from in terms of intellectual and financial wellness. And I deliberately put this at the last because this was probably the most complex. Can lighting really bring about financial wellness? So let's look at the hypothesis here. So for intellectual and financial wellness, I'm trying to hypothesize is that lighting design that naturally incorporates optimal focus, sustained attention, and reliable memory can enable us to maintain wealth and finances. Now let's look at intellectual and financial wellness independently in more detail. So, intellectual wellness is how you creatively engage your mind in stimulating activities such as lifelong learning in order to be curious. And the idea of doing that is to expand your own knowledge, skills, and also to share these knowledge and skills with others. So that's how you grow intellectually. So, intellectual wellness is not about just consuming, it's also about sharing. So intellectual, the more you share, the more you learn. So that's how intellectual wellness develops. So that's where intellectual wellness comes into play. So how does this relate to lighting? It's an internal manifestation which is elicited by something called the visual system. Now, our perception or how we see the world depends on three systems that we've talked about. First was the circadian system, the perceptual system, and most importantly, the visual system. And this is about how the eyes and all these connecting pathways from the eyes to the brain and the visual cortex work together. So, how does the eye and the brain perceive anything in our space? So, firstly, what happens again is with the right intensity, the right spectrum of light, as soon as you enter a space, first thing you see are shapes. So you see the shape of a bird, and then you start identifying patterns. Oh, that's a macaw. And then you start looking at details. Wow, that's a colorful, beautiful macaw. So that's how it works: shape, patterns, and details. And intellectual wellness happens when you have the right intensity, the right spectrum, because it helps in improving your decision making process. Because what it does is provides optimal focus. Only when you have the right intensity, the right spectrum of light, are you able to focus on the object. You can have sustained attention to actually start identifying the patterns, the details, and then your brain then starts recording all of this information into creating reliable memory. Now let's look at financial wellness. Financial wellness is about how to manage your financial expenses because money can impact health and performance. So, in order to be financially strong, secure, you need to start planning ahead, set aside budgets, goals, utilize resources, and expand your budget. And in order to be able to do all of that, what you need is this external manifestation of visual acuity. So, visual acuity in built spaces because it makes you aware of your focus and attention. Only when you have the focus, you're able to know, okay, this is my money. I need to be smart about managing it in the best possible manner. And here it's about intensity spectrum to encourage the right decisions from us in built environments. And you can see that in both these environments, which one is something which is more from a financial point of view, which makes you much more secure, is obviously the one which is below the brighter environment is what makes you financially more secure because that's what makes you know and look. Now, a lot of this is theory. How does all of this get applied in a practical example? So let's look at a real world case study example of now this is just a typical work environment, an office space. So firstly, you're looking at it from a environmental wellness. You're also looking from a physical wellness, your perceptual clues. So what you do is light up the space from an architectural point of view. So you see the boundaries of this space. So all these vertical illumination, cylindrical illumination that we talk about helps you in the primary aspects of wellness. And then you start looking at it from a task aspect. So, your occupational wellness, sustained attention, focus. In order to be able to understand the task of your work, in order to climb the stair, you need the right kind of task lighting without to be able to navigate through the space without injuring yourself. And then you're looking at it from a spiritual point of view, where you have these accentuated areas, these art objects, this beautiful tree, this beautiful painting. All of this brings in these emotional wellness, spiritual wellness, and that's where you combine and put all this lighting together. And all of this put together, and that's where you also start looking at it from a uh, health perspective as to what color temperature to use at what time of the day, because then all this we looked at were more spatial patterns, but we also need to start looking at temporal patterns. So what kind of color temperature is suitable for what time of the day? Is warm light suitable? Is cooler light suitable? And that's where this whole concept of color tunability also comes into play in terms of looking at it from a wellness point of view. So in conclusion, trying to summarize this whole presentation, where I bring comprehensibility and nature incorporation, where lighting designs, lighting environments that are designed with decipherable features and familiar elements from nature that aid in legibility and wayfinding form the foundation for enhancing comprehensibility. So if I'm to be simplifying this, comprehensible lighting is all about being orderly and predictable because it's nothing wrong in being predictable because it enables you to understand spaces and activities. Manageability and nature interactions. What it says is that lighted environments that are designed to foster competence through naturally accessible resources that allow individuals to exercise control, inclusively accommodate individual needs, and remain flexible and responsive to change contribute to manageability. And in simple terms, lighting that is manageable, lighting that is within your control. And it's important to understand that we human beings are control freaks. Always we want to be in control of our situations. So we want lighting that enables you to take care of your surroundings. And finally, meaningfulness and nature inspiration. So lighted environments that are designed to engage the senses through naturally atmospheric and material qualities thereby evoking feelings and experience of self-worth and a sense of purpose are perceived to be meaningful. So in short, meaningful lighting that makes you feel worthwhile, that is interesting and provides satisfaction. And that's where bringing these connotations of nature really helps, because nature is something which really starts bringing these things of meaning. With that, I would conclude my presentation. Thank you so much.